in the chat. But yes, thank you everyone for being here today and joining our press conference. Thank you for folks who are tuning in. Good evening to you all, and good morning if you are tuning in from the Philippines. But yeah, so this is our Defend Migrants campaign press conference, which is being hosted by Migrante USA and the National Alliance for Filipino Concerns, or as folks may know, NAFCON. So we are joined today by a broad coalition of organizations who have banded together to ensure the defense of our community amidst the ongoing attacks against migrants. I'm Edmari Gutierrez. I am currently the Internal Vice President for Gov'T Alliance, and we are a nationwide alliance for Filipino youth who come together to educate, unite, and act on the issues that are affecting us here and back home in the Philippines. We recognize there is an important role to be filled in ensuring that we can bring together Filipinos across the country to support one another during this time of fear and anxiety. And we want to provide assurance that we will support and protect each other as our most urgent responsibility right now. So while Trump continues to launch his attacks on immigrants and seeks to vilify them, we are here to tell the story of why Filipinos migrate in the first place, to seek livelihood for our families amidst the intensifying economic crisis that is currently worsening and is only worsening. So as we have seen, Trump has expanded the ability to conduct mass deportations through his executive orders. For me personally, I am a high school teacher as well, and most of my students come from migrant families or are migrants themselves. And we've even seen how ICE is allowed to operate in places that were once considered sanctuaries. So places like schools, churches, hospitals. And we have been seeing the ordering of Customs and Border Patrol to utilize the expedited removal to carry out these deportations. Where migrants would not even have the opportunity to see an immigration judge before being deported. He has made a big political statement by passing the Lincoln-Riley Act, which requires federal authorities to detain undocumented immigrants who are charged or not even convicted with crimes as minor as theft. So this creates a situation where migrants can easily be accused for crimes and then consequently be imprisoned. So at the same time, we are holding this press conference because the Philippine government has yet to provide any substantial or real support for its people, especially those who are most vulnerable. So even as we've tried to advocate to our fellow Filipinos who are facing deportation and are currently in detention, the embassy and consulate has not done anything on the behalf of beyond the broad statements indicating that they will support without ever taking action. This advice, the advice by Romualdez to quote unquote self-deport has also created some confusion and even panic within our own community. It is in this context that we are presenting our efforts, sharing the voices and stories of those who are the most vulnerable during this time. But, we're not only just showing that, but we are also fighting and being there for each other. And, it's our best guarantee for our safety and welfare. Yes, again, thank you. Welcome to our press conference. We will be transitioning to our first speaker, Narissa from NAFCON, who will be sharing about what is NAFCON doing to push the Defend Migrants Network and sharing more about the recent attacks of Filipino migrants in her home community of Chicago. So, thanks.
Sorry, everyone. So magandang umaga sa ating mga kababayan dyan sa Pilipinas at Magandang gabi dito sa US. Ako po si Nerissa Alegretti, President ng National Alliance for Filipino Concerns or NAFCON. I am also a health worker, community organizer, and a human rights advocate here in Chicago and the Midwest. So, before going further, I would just like to emphasize that we as a community, the Filipinos and Filipino-American community, are very hard-working immigrants. I would say there is no hour in the US where there is no Filipino nurse or health worker. So that's how important we are in the fabric, the social, economic, and political fabric of the US. And yet, this is happening to us. So, NAFCON is actually very critical and condemn the impact of President Trump's policy that are affecting now the immigrants. I think it hasn't been mentioned, but if Ambassador Romualdez said there's like 200,000 plus Filipino undocumented, or the Department of Foreign Affairs or the Department of Migrant Workers would say 350,000. From among us community organizers, we know that it's almost 1 million Filipinos. And it's because, we already know, everybody knows that the joblessness and poverty in the Philippines pushes a lot of Filipinos to come here. So I would like to have that as an important point of why we are all here. Regarding the condemnation of the impact of President Trump's policy, it is highly felt in Chicago. Chicago is actually ground zero of the mass deportation. When Tom Homan, the border czar, announced when he was in Chicago in December 9, that when President Trump start his day or first hour in office, Chicago would be the mass deportation, the first operations of mass deportation will start in Chicago. And we know Chicago is a sanctuary city. But what happened was that last January 27, which is like more than a week since the inauguration of President Trump, our network, NAFCON, which is a part of the Tanggol Migrante Defend Migrants Network, were contacted by a caregiver who had the information about 8 Filipina caregivers in a building in Highland Park, which is a suburb of Chicago, that were arrested by ICE. And then, that was January 27, and what they told us was that it took place on January 24, but it took some time for them to find an advocates group where they can make a report. So that very day, which is a Monday, January 27, we contacted lawyers that can help us, immigrant rights lawyers. And actually, we only had one name because the one who reported to us also had limitation in knowing the other caregivers. And actually, the caregivers who knew them are very afraid because they're also undocumented, and actually they were in hiding. And so we only got one name, and since we didn't have the alien number or even the date of birth, we stayed until midnight that Monday, the 27th of January, and we could never really locate which detention center. The following day, the 28th, we heard a report again from the same source that they were already deported, and that on the 29th, Wednesday, they received report from families back in the Philippines that they already arrived in the Philippines. So that was really very quick. It was really, truly what President Trump promised, which is expedited. And we don't even know what charges they have. There was, as far as we know, there was no warrant given. So actually, out of the 8 who were arrested and detained, 2 were released because they were able to provide legal papers to stay here. And even the two are afraid to speak up and be interviewed by the advocates group, Tanggol Migrante. And then the second case, which is now in the heart of Chicago City itself, took place in Albany Park, which is the largest concentration of Filipino immigrants and other immigrant groups. February 3rd, which is a Sunday, at 3 o'clock in the afternoon, two Filipinas, and this is a report from one of the health worker who also live in the area. Two Filipinas, which were standing near the Brown Line train station of the Chicago Transit Authority, were asked by four plainclothes men, huge guys, and they were asked, "Are you citizens?" And then they got rattled and panicked, and it was confirmed that they're Filipinas because they speak in Tagalog. But all the people around the area started to distance themselves, and nobody was able to take a video. So then it was reported to us 3 hours after, and we had pass it on messages in different churches and Filipino organizations. They know who those two Filipinos are, so that if we get the name, we can find which detention center they are, and we can find a way to help with immigration lawyer and other support. Because we already have experience here in Chicago. NAFCON already have an experience where there were people who were detained, which is 20 years ago, who needed medication and they had a problem. A person had an attack, a heart attack. At least the person did not die. But those kind of things where they don't have their medication, you don't go around shopping and bring your medication. You have your medication when you reach the house in the nighttime or before you leave the house. So until now, this is the third day, and we still don't know who those two Filipinas are. We're thinking of having an audience and a dialogue with the Philippine consulate here if they receive report from the U.S. government that these particular people are taken. Where are they and what's going on? What are their names? So that's where we are with the situation in Chicago. That's why I am painfully frustrated when I saw this article about the Department of Foreign Affairs Undersecretary Eduardo de Vega, when he said that there is no illegal Filipino immigrants arrested during Trump's crackdown. It's not true. It's happening in Chicago. The people who reported the caregivers who reported the incident and the health worker who works in the nursing home, these are very credible people. Right now, we're trying to find a way for them to step up and not be afraid and say something. Because if we keep being silent about this, it will be hard, no? And the same thing, that same challenge with the Philippine government to step up and encourage its citizens to speak up. So with this, actually, after December 9, what are we doing, So after December 9, in December 12, the whole Chicagoland advocates of immigrant rights, from the labor movement, churches, different social movements, we had an emergency meeting on December 12. And after that, the National Alliance for Filipino Concern in Chicago formed the Tanggol Migrante on December 14. And right away, we had Know Your Rights training. It was composed of volunteers and affected families. Affected families means, in our experience here, the parents are undocumented, but the children have birthright in this country. So it's a mixed status family. So since then, during the Simbang Gabi, we were doing flyering, we were doing announcement of preparation for this upcoming situation. In January, we have the Sinulog celebration. We also did flyering. And currently, I think we have almost 50 volunteers that are being trained for different parts of the advocacy. We have like rapid response, like community support. We're forming mutual support groups among families who are affected. We have a way of communicating urgent updates and intake form, those kind of support and working committees. And we are also the Tanggol Migrante or the Defend Migrant Campaign Network, where NAFCON is a part of or one of the main organizer. We are well connected with the different immigrant groups in Chicago, and we're hoping to expand our networking in the whole of the Midwest because the Midwest is very different. You know, the isolation of Filipinos here is actually different. So we're working with local politicians like the city councilors, commissioners of the Cook County in Illinois, which is the biggest county in the whole of Illinois and even in the U.S. and the most diverse. Then also the state senators and actually our local Congress people. So, it's ground zero. Is Chicago is ground zero, and it's very tight. Our situation right now is tight. All the volunteers are trying to have like a 24/7 kind of monitoring, so that we are going to be timely with the situation. There's also a lot actually of protest actions going on in Chicago, and there is strong unity between brown and black community and different advocates group, especially labor in the churches. Honestly, with the ban on, with the lifting of the ban of sanctuary cities and other sanctuary places, we're afraid, but we're still determined to fight, that the next raids will be happening in the churches. We already heard a report from one of the churches that their national leadership already sent them a letter that ICE will come and visit the churches. So it's actually confirmed. And yeah, the hope is there. We are all like organizing to face the situation. But for me and for us, we really wanted also the Philippine government to take action. I know there's a lot of nice report in the newspaper, but compared to what we're doing right now, which is very concrete, and the limitations or that the Philippine government have, there's unequal or disparity na ano. And compared to the Colombian president, where there's more decisiveness, to help their compatriots. I would like to end my point with, I expect more from the Philippine government while we are facing this kind of situation.
We will
Thank
be
you.
moving on, and we will be hearing a testimony from Ligaya Jensen, who is currently being unjustly detained in Eloy, Arizona. So we currently have Angela here with us from Anak Bayan Inland Empire to share on her behalf.
All right. Hi, everyone. My name is Angela. I'm a member of Anak Bayan Inland Empire. And we're really here today to share the story of Ligaya Jensen, who's a Filipina migrant who has been unjustly detained by ICE for over 6 years, and she now faces imminent deportation. We've really taken up the campaign because she was detained for over 5 years in Adelanto ICE Processing Center in the Inland Empire, and we've had direct contact with her through phone and email, so I'll also be including some of her direct testimony. And even though we're highlighting Ligaya's case today, it's not an isolated case. There's many other Filipino migrants and migrants from all over the world who are detained in the same situation. and it's part of the larger system, the U.S. immigration system, which is specifically designed to criminalize, exploit, and deport migrants for profit. So I want to start off by talking about Ligaya's prolonged detention in ICE. So after serving her sentence for a crime that she was convicted of in the past, which I won't delve into today, but we definitely have talked about it before. ICE has immediately transferred her, where she's been held in detention for over 6 years. So she's actually been in ICE detention for longer than her original sentence. She states, "It has been over 5 years since I started litigating my case in January 2019. U.S. Supreme Court and the majority of U.S. district courts have condemned ICE for keeping individuals detained for years and years, stating that it is unconstitutional and unacceptable." And also her immigration case has bounced back and forth 9 times between different agencies. And the whole time, ICE has been keeping her locked up because they actually profit off of detaining her and other migrants. So we also believe that it's highly likely that they are retaliating against Ligaya because she has been a very strong advocate for herself and for other detained migrants by speaking out about the conditions inside of the detention centers. And so she also testifies that the fear of deportation under Trump is growing amongst the people who are inside the detention centers, and many migrants live in fear every day. Many of her fellow detainees are terrified that their deportation orders could come at any moment, including Ligaya. She says, "Every single day, people here are scared that their name will be called. They know they have no protection, no support. They see people disappear overnight, taken away, deported. We live with that fear constantly." And this is especially true under the second Trump presidency, which we're currently under. The risk of deportation for migrants is even greater, considering that under Trump's last term, ICE expanded its powers, deported thousands of people en masse, including Filipinos, and ramped up the criminalization of migrants. Currently, we're also seeing that ICE detention centers like the Adelanto ICE Processing Center, where Ligaya was detained for over 5 years, are now lifting their intake bans and are increasing their capacity to detain migrants, which is also something that we are campaigning against and campaigning for the closure of these detention centers. In addition to the U.S. government's neglect, they're also experiencing the neglect of the Philippine government. So despite the Philippines having one of the largest overseas worker populations in the world, the Marcos administration does nothing to protect Filipinos abroad. And Ligaya states in her testimony, "I have been detained for more than 6 years, and the Philippine consulate has never visited me, never checked on me, never provided any support." And she has also reached out to the consulate multiple times, who has completely ignored her, stating that they will not support any Filipino national who has been convicted of a crime. And so then I would also like to talk about the corporate profiteering by Geo Group, Core Civic, and other private prison corporations that are actually profiting off of keeping migrants locked up indefinitely and also forcing them to work in modern-day slavery conditions. Ligaya states, "Every day, Geo Group gets paid for my stay here. There is no incentive for them to release me, so they keep me detained indefinitely while they profit off of my life. They force us to work so they don't have to hire actual employees. They don't give us cleaning supplies, so we have to clean using whatever we have. I wipe down my room with maxi pads because they won't give us rags, and if we refuse to work, they punish us." And so this can be really seen by Ligaya's case and other migrants in these detention centers who are forced to work for as little as $1 a day, cleaning the very facilities that imprison them. And currently Ligaya has a job as a porter, I believe, where she makes $2 a day. And in addition to that, Ligaya and other migrants inside the detention centers experience inhumane conditions, including medical neglect, malnutrition, psychological abuse, and unsanitary living conditions. She has talked in her testimony about the water, which is discolored, the food is not edible, and being given 1 bar of soap per week, which they must use to clean everything, including their bodies, their dishes, and clothes. The mattresses have very poor support, which results in a lot of injuries. And at one point, she was held in solitary confinement when she was the last woman detained in Adelanto. And she states, "I cried when I had to eat alone. I cried when I read the newspapers. I cried when I solved puzzles. I even cried when I cleaned my room. I drastically lost weight because of my circumstances." And so we're really seeing that people are being held in torture conditions, and this is happening on U.S. soil funded by our taxpayer dollars. And so we have a lot of demands. We demand that Ligaya is released immediately and all migrants in detention. And we want to end especially the prolonged ICE detention. We would also demand a full pardon to stop her deportation. We don't want her to be, after all these years of suffering, to just be deported and separated from her families. It's really inhumane. And we're also demanding an end to Geo Group and Core Civics profiting off of detaining migrants in these conditions. And we're also demanding to shut down Adelanto ICE Processing Center and all private detention facilities. And for the Filipinos, for our Filipino community who wants to get involved and maybe in a similar situation, we also want to build our networks of self-defense for our community, because we know that the government repeatedly has shown that they won't protect us. So that's why we're calling on Filipinos to join Tanggol Migrante Network, so that we can defend and protect our kababayan from deportation, detention, and repression. So we're also asking you to call your representatives and demand Ligaya's release, share her story, and expose ICE's inhumane treatment of migrants, and also to keep organizing and mobilizing, because we can also win these campaigns and win our demands through our collective action. And so I'd like to also let you hear from Ligaya herself, if we can play the recording.
You're saying that the deportation orders could come within 2 to 3 weeks for you po. Tama po ba yun?
Yes, mandate by the 30 goes to be issued within 2 to 3 weeks. We have no choice but to return to the ID island to be removed. I don't want to be. I have no family. After I left the life that I left from the good and going to nothing. So they're saying we need to engage and bring attention to the people in power. We have some kind of and to know we are human beings and heartbroken.
Yeah, so I just want to emphasize that the reason why the audio is so bad, and this is a repeated experience that we've had in trying to contact her, is because these detention centers purposefully make it very difficult to access people who are in detention. And so it's just another way of showing that the importance of us really advocating for them and reaching out to the people who are in detention. But thank you for listening, and thank you for being here. And I'd like to pass it back to the facilitators.
Yes. Thank you, Angela, for sharing that very powerful testimony and those quotes from Ligaya herself about, the current and very dehumanizing conditions in these pro-profit detention centers. We just wanted to request if it was okay to extend by 15 minutes just to make time for Q&A to ensure that we have a very lively Q&A. If you have any questions, please look for our Q&A moderator, Jupi, and share any questions that you may have with them. From the Mission to End Modern Day Slavery Legal Network, to share more about how to support someone that is going through the immigration system.
Hi, hello. Like Edmari said, I'm Court, and I am an immigration attorney with the MEMS Legal Network. I have been practicing law for about a decade now, and particularly representing people like Ligaya who are in ICE custody and facing incredibly inhumane treatment in those facilities. When I heard just now that she's being detained at Eloy Detention Center, I realized that Eloy is actually one of the most notorious detention centers in the country, and community advocates, the immigrants' rights movement, has been calling for the closure of Eloy for years and years now. I think Angela did a great job at putting Ligaya's testimony into context of the broader system, and so if I can just add to that and mention that the immigration system as we know it today is actually not a new system. I know there is a huge amount of fear-mongering and paranoia. Other feelings I've heard are helplessness. But to be frank, this is only an extension of the systems that have been occurring for decades now in the United States. This has led to what we see is a 3 million case backlog before the immigration courts in this country, and more than 40,000 people currently in ICE custody. And this president is trying to double that number right now. He has even opened Guantanamo Bay again for the purpose of detaining migrants. And the immigration system not only impacts people like Ligaya, people who are detained, but also impacts their families and community members. Everyone in communities are impacted when the breadwinner of a family is incarcerated. I've seen many of my clients have children who end up having PTSD or severe anxiety in school and are unable to complete their schooling because they don't have their parent around to pick them up from school or help do their homework. I've seen instances where families have been torn apart because of the lengthy separation, because immigration court hearings can last several months and even years. So this is a process that is deadly. It is also embedded into the American so-called justice system, right? So I share that to also share that, there are significant limitations in the legal process. I think Narissa also alluded to the fact that it's slow. Immigration judges can make really arbitrary decisions depending on their mood for the day or whether or not they had lunch that day. There are actually studies that go into those figures. So we know that it's a slow process, it's racist, it's dehumanizing, and relying solely on the legal process will never afford people the actual justice that they deserve. Ligaya, for example, will not get her 5-6 years of life back that she has lost to ICE detention and this harsh punitive system. This is why I find it incredibly important for the legal community and community organizers to be working closely, now more than ever, to both understand the changes in the law, which are happening rapidly and are extremely confusing and alarming. And also, lawyers need to be hearing from communities on the ground. So I'm certainly in support of the Defend Migrants campaign networks across the country and see them as a way to build the necessary, crucial political power and people power that is needed to overcome such a deadly system. And so that is more on the United States immigration system, but I also want to pivot and note that the Philippine government also has a role to play. As Tita Nerissa alluded to, the consulate in many ways, not just in Chicago, but also here in New York, has been negligent in its behavior towards our kababayan. I would even go so far as to call it reckless behavior. I worked as a legal volunteer for the Denmark and Jovi campaign, which high level is about 2 healthcare workers who were wrongfully arrested. They were criminalized and slandered in mass media. They have been placed in ICE custody, separated far away from their friends and family, and they have been treated like animals. Those are really their words. And, we are trying to respect the privacy of them and their families at this time due to really sensitive conditions that they're subject to. But I'd rather focus more so on the government's actions, or rather inactions, as part of this story. I recently saw a lot of press suggesting that the Philippine consulate has provided assistance to nationals funds to the friends and family of Denmark and Jovi, which I can confirm 100% is false. And they have not, in fact, provided the funds that have been already spent to pay for legal fees, expensive legal fees, tens of thousands of dollars for the 2 of them. Instead, the consulate has made us jump through several legal hoops, and despite us complying with every single request, we still do not have the funds. The family does not have the funds in its possession. Like Ligaya's situation, the consulate has also failed to conduct wellness checks for their own nationals. And so that begs the question, who is it that the consulate is really serving at this time? And so I wanted to, address the fear in the room and address people here who are looking to protect our migrant communities and keep our kababayan safe. And, it's really, really challenging to navigate a system where every participant in that system is against you. But we also know that these networks are being stood up in order to bring everyone together in solidarity and in unity to protect our kababayan. And so the question here is, how does someone support a friend or family member or any other person who is going through the immigration legal system? I have 3 suggestions, and Of course, there's more, but we can start with 3. One is to find trusted attorneys that work with community organizers and community organizations that really hold the interest of our community members at the forefront of their practice. In contrast, there are many, many attorneys out there that profit off of the confusion of this moment and are engaged in scams. There have been lots of scams on the internet, especially over Facebook. So it's so important that people do not give strangers money over Facebook. It's extremely important that you work with attorneys that you know and can trust. And secondly, it's so crucial to learn your rights. At the scale that Trump is anticipating, there simply are not enough lawyers in this country to represent everyone. And so it is really incumbent upon all of us in the community to be firm in our grasp of our rights. And it's also important to practice, to exercise these rights regularly and to regularly update ourselves on these rights. Because, as mentioned previously, the law is swiftly changing and there are new laws every single day. There have been since Trump came into office. I think the third and final recommendation that I have for people seeking to support people going through the immigration system is to really strengthen and tighten the moral and material support that is available to people who are in ICE custody, to families who are experiencing extreme loss, and really bolster these networks that we are creating in order to serve our communities so much better and in ways they deserve, and in ways that both the U.S. and Philippine government have neglected until now. So if there are questions after this, I'm happy to answer them. But I really appreciate the time to speak, and I'm extremely humbled to go after such a heart-wrenching testimony by Ligaya. And for every Ligaya, there really are tens of thousands more people who need us. So thank you to the Defend Migrants campaign and all of the networks and people who are supportive of this movement.
Yes, thank you, Cora. Migrants across the United States.
Hi, thank you. Yeah, I'm Lester from Migrante USA. Migrante is a migrant workers organization that fights for the rights and welfare of Filipino migrant workers here in the USA. Migrante USA has been fighting for the rights of Filipino migrants and has been a support for our kababayan since it was established in 2018. We have launched many campaigns such as the case of human and labor trafficking, wage theft, and various issues at the work, especially now with the new struggle of migrant workers under the leadership of Trump in the U.S. Because we work on the ground and talking in the Filipino communities, we learned that many of our kababayan today are worried and afraid of the threat of mass deportation. And they became hopeless, especially when they heard Hussein Walder's statement that those without legal status will self-deport. Due to this condition of migrants, Migrante USA, together with various community organizations, established the Defend Migrant campaign with the objectives to help and protect the migrant community from the attack from the Trump administration. Under the Defend Migrant campaign, we built a Tanggol Migrante network so that we can strengthen the unity of migrants communities to ensure that we protect each other and raise the demand to stop deportation of our migrants. Filipino migrants would not end up in this condition if there's a good job and living wage in the Philippines. We will not choose to work abroad and separated from our family. Under the labor export policy of former President Marcos Sr., and it is still being continued until now by current leadership of Marcos Jr., They serve Filipino outside the country for their labor and benefit from the remittance of our overseas Filipino workers. In 2024, we Filipino in the U.S. sent 31 billion in remittance home. But corrupt officials in the government continue to milking our OFW, while corruption is rampant in various government agencies. Just like Vice President Sara, misuse of the confidential funds of the Office of the Vice President and Department of Education that reached more than 600 million pesos. Also for us to keep in mind that the confidential fund of President Marcos are about 4.5 billion pesos. While our countrymen are suffering in the middle of the economic crisis in the country, and our Filipino migrants are enslaved in other countries, most of them became vulnerable to abuse and exploitation of their employer. But even if they were led to such condition, they could do nothing but endure and sacrifice because they thought about the lives of their families when they return home to the Philippines. None of us should have to experience such hardship, including living in fear of being undocumented. If we have better living wage in the Philippines, if we don't have reliable protection or help from our government, who can we rely on? Especially with the new government here in the U.S. But let's consolidate our demands and objections on mass deportation because we know it will cause great suffering to our kababayan who were forced to leave their homeland for the sake of their families. If they're certain that only the migrants but also their families will suffer, our unity and resistance will save us from the threat of mass deportation. I learned from Migrante USA the importance of organizing together and fighting the injustices we face not only at the hands of our employers, of the U.S. government, but the hands of the Philippine government itself. That's why we stand with dozens of other organizations around the world in fight for a living wage and social change in the Philippines. President Marcos must address the dire hardship faced by Filipino workers, including those abroad and under the threat of mass deportation. Salamat po. Trabaho sa Pinas, hindi sa labas. Sahod itaas, presyo ibaba. Mabuhay ang Pilipino lumalaban para sa tunay na kalayaan at demokrasya sa Pilipinas. Maraming salamat po.
Thank you, Kuya Lester, for sharing about how Migrante USA is helping lead the Defend Migrants campaign to really defend our kababayan and what we want to see for our people. We are going to be transitioning to our Q&A session. I know we are at 6 o'clock, but as mentioned prior, of the Defend Migrants Campaign Network. So for our final question, this is for any speaker, but what exactly happens when you try to get help from the embassy, the consulates, or the MWO, which is the Migrant Workers Office? Do they acknowledge the concerns at least, or no response at all? Maybe can we get Court to share? Or but it's for any speaker.
Sure. I think I can only speak to my experience working with the consulate to release the ATN funds to Denmark and Jovi's friends and family. The consulate, we filed the application for ATN funds, and it was pending for months prior to receiving an answer, and then it's also been several months even since then. They have already approved the funds, but have not. They keep telling us to give special powers of attorney. Oh, and then you need another special power of attorney. It's really like legal. barriers and challenges that they're putting up. So I would say that, they are responsive because there has been pressure via these campaigns, via the people who come together and rally at the consulate and tell them to go do their jobs. It is so important that we continue to hold that pressure, to hold our government officials accountable, both here in the U.S. and Filipino government. And that's part of our role in these networks, is to ensure that the Philippine government is paying attention and to ensure that they do listen to our demands, and they are held accountable when they don't meet those demands. So I would say that, it's not a super fun experience, but it's a really important one to be there for our government.
Thank you for sharing, Court. Really sharing that it's really the campaigns, it's our organizations, it's our network that really comes together and shows up for our people when the government fails to show up for us. And, we will be the ones who will continue to keep each other safe and be there for one another. When, the Philippine government chooses to ignore us, chooses not to be there for its people, not to take up the call, not to take up the call to serve its people. So we will serve our own people, right? We will serve our community. So with that being said, we just want to share some current efforts in different areas across the U.S. What are people doing in their communities to really take up the Tanggol Migrante campaign, take up the Defend Migrants campaign? So in New Jersey, we see that there is an upcoming campaigns call on February 8th, 8:30 to 9. If not, just wanted to give some reminders that we will be sending out the recording promptly for folks to access. And yes, thank you for being here tonight for our Defend Migrants campaign press conference. Wherever you are tuning in, we hope that folks are able to continue to build these networks, and this will not be the last time that we will be sharing our challenges and our lessons as a collective. But yes, with that being said, thank you, and let's defend our migrants. Okay, thank you, y'all.
Thank you. Mabuhay.
Reporting from Chicago, Illinois, this is Joseph Gilariosa of PelAmMessenger.net.